My name is Julia Shorman, and until that morning, I genuinely thought I understood what love was supposed to feel like. I thought I was living it, breathing it wrapped in the quiet certainty that I had finally found my person. For almost a year, Sundays had been our religion, the one sacred ritual in a world that felt too loud and too fast. My bed, his warmth, the soft hum of the city outside my apartment window that was home. This Sunday began like all the best ones do, with sunlight spilling through the blinds in soft golden lines. The air was warm from our shared breath, the blankets tangled around our legs from the night before. Sheldon lay beside me, shirtless, his chest rising and falling in that calm, peaceful rhythm that used to make me think about forever. I'd been secretly saving for months, scraping together little amounts here and there, imagining weekends spent in a bigger shared space, one where I could cook for him properly, not just in my tiny, cramped kitchen. I wasn't planning a proposal or anything dramatic. I simply wanted to build a life with him. Something real, something shared. But that morning, the air shifted. Sheldon wasn't curled against me like usual. He was turned slightly away, the glow of his phone reflecting off his face, illuminating the little smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't the smirk he gave me after I teased him. It was softer, private, intimate in a way that was meant for someone else. I nudged his shoulder gently, letting my voice stay light despite the small twist in my stomach. Hey, Sunday rules. No outside world, remember? He let out a half laugh, the distracted kind he used when he wasn't really listening. Just a second, he murmured, "This is funny." I tried to smile, but something inside me tightened. I shifted onto my side, propping myself up on one elbow. Sheldon's thumbs flew across the screen with a speed and ease I hadn't seen in months. He was smiling at his phone the same way he'd smiled at me last night when I brought him homemade tiramisu after a horrible workday. "Who's entertaining you this early?" I asked. My tone was playful. My heart was not. Did Connor finally break up with his disastrous girlfriend? Sheldon didn't laugh. Oh, no, not Connor. He didn't elaborate. That was the moment the knot in my stomach shifted into something colder. He kept typing and smiling. "Sheldon," I said softly, "who are you talking to?" He finally turned to me, but the smile lingered in the edges of his eyes. "Relax, Jules. It's just this girl from my gym. Chloe. She's hilarious." Chloe. The name tasted unfamiliar and acidic on my tongue. I blinked slowly. "A girl from your gym?" "Yeah," he said, completely unbothered. "Chloe Bennett. She sent me this meme and it spiraled." Spiraled. Right there in my bed on our sacred Sunday morning. I sat up slightly, pulling the sheet around my chest. The cozy warmth of the room suddenly felt suffocating. "Sheldon, why is she texting you on a Sunday morning?" He sighed dramatically, finally lowering the phone, but keeping it in his hand like a security blanket. "Don't start," he said, rolling onto his back. "It's not a big deal. You're being a little possessive." The word hit me like a slap. "Possessive," I repeated quietly. "Sheldon, we've been together for a year. I met your parents. You left a toothbrush here. We've talked about moving in together." And he said, an eyebrow raising, "We're dating. We're having fun. But we're not exclusive." I froze. "What?" He shifted upright, drawing his knees up, creating distance like I was the one who had betrayed something. "We're not exclusive," he repeated, his voice annoyingly calm. "Not until I say so. We never had the conversation." My breath left my body in a single cold exhale. "Not until I say so." As if exclusivity, commitment, basic respect were privileges he alone granted. I searched his face for any sign of a joke, a crack, a flicker of remorse. There was none. Only certainty. "So," I whispered, all those conversations about our future. "Those were just what practice." He shrugged. "You assume things. That's not on me." The room spun slightly, then settled into awful clarity. He wasn't confused. He wasn't stumbling. He had believed this the entire time. The relationship I thought we had lived entirely in my head. I swallowed once, twice, forcing my voice steady. "Sheldon, you were texting another girl while lying in my bed." His jaw ticked. "It was just a meme." "Don't exaggerate. You're being dramatic." There it was. The pivot. The subtle manipulation I had ignored for months suddenly glaring under the morning light. Something sharp, cold, and painfully honest sliced through me, and then I went numb. Without a word, I pushed the blankets back and slipped out of bed. Sheldon scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're seriously doing this right now, Julia. Stop. This is embarrassing." But I wasn't listening. I walked to my closet, pulled my suitcase down, and laid it open on the floor. The zipper sounded like thunder in the otherwise quiet room. Sheldon froze. "What are you doing?" I didn't look at him. I opened my dresser drawer and began taking out clothes, folding them carefully, placing them inside the suitcase with silent precision. Julia, he said, a laugh, bubbling out brittle uneasy. You're having a meltdown. This is a tantrum. Fold, place, fold, place. The rhythm grounded me. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're leaving over this. I finally paused a t-shirt in my hands. I looked at him, really looked. Gone was the man I thought I loved. In his place sat a stranger who believed loyalty was optional unless he personally declared otherwise. There is no this, Sheldon, I said quietly. There's only the truth, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. He blinked, thrown by the calm in my voice. You don't get to decide we're done, he protested. That's not how it works. It works exactly like that, I replied, and I zipped the suitcase closed. He stood there, sheet around his waist, anger sharpening his features. Where are you even going to go? That's not your concern anymore. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and walked to the bedroom door. Julia. I didn't turn around. When the front door clicked shut behind me, it felt like the sound of a life ending and another beginning. The first 48 hours after leaving Sheldon's apartment drifted by in a gray, dreamlike haze. I checked into a long-stay business hotel near my office, the kind with beige walls, scratchy sheets, and framed photos of forests that were clearly printed from stock image websites. It didn't matter. The room had nothing in it that could remind me of him, and that absence was a relief I didn't know I needed. The silence was heavy but clean, a sharp contrast to the suffocating tension I had felt that morning in my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar mattress and exhaled for what felt like the first time. My phone didn't allow the silence to last. Sheldon began texting me before I had even finished unpacking. His first message claimed he wanted to talk like adults. The next several messages accused me of being dramatic. By mid-afternoon, he insisted he was still waiting at my apartment, that he wasn't leaving until I came home. Hours later, he proclaimed I was being cruel for ignoring him. Not once did he apologize. There was no acknowledgement of what he had said, what he had done, how deeply he had disrespected the relationship I thought we shared. He was angry at losing control, not sorry for hurting me. I blocked his number. That should have been the end of it. But by Monday morning, he had found ways around the block. Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn, a level of desperation so absurd, I almost laughed. I had never imagined Sheldon as the type of man to beg for attention on a platform meant for job recruiters and corporate updates, yet there he was sending me messages disguised as connection requests. I blocked every account one by one, sweeping the last remnants of him out of my digital life like clearing glass shards from a kitchen floor. Still, the emotional exhaustion lingered. That night, I sat on the stiff hotel mattress with my knees pulled to my chest and cried, not over losing him, but over how foolish I felt. I cried for the version of myself who had believed him, trusted him, built a future around him. The tears weren't loud or dramatic. They came in short, controlled bursts that burned hot, then faded quickly. By the time I fell asleep, the worst of it had already drained out of my system. The next morning, I felt strangely lighter, as if the sadness had carved out space inside me, making room for clarity. I showered, put on mascara, and went to work. No one noticed anything different except Sarah, a coworker, who lingered longer than usual by my desk. She asked if I was okay. I said yes. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push, and that was exactly what I needed. 2 nights later, I met my friend Michael Ross at a bar near my office. He took one look at me as I walked in and whistled. You look like you've been hit by a train, he said, sliding a beer toward me. I took a long sip and told him the bare minimum Sheldon texting another girl in my bed, insisting we weren't exclusive unless he decided, so then acting offended when I refused to tolerate it. Michael shook his head and muttered something under his breath that would have gotten him kicked out of a church. Then he told me something I didn't expect. Julia. Chloe wasn't new, he said with that careful tone people use when delivering information they know will hurt. They've been talking for a while, at least a month, maybe more. My grip tightened on the glass. You're sure? Positive, he replied. A few people from the gym saw them getting flirty after class. Nothing physical, as far as anyone knows, but definitely not just friendly. It shouldn't have surprised me, yet somehow it still felt like a slap. A final confirmation that the relationship I thought I was in had been dissolving long before I realized it. I sat there for a moment, letting the truth settle like cold water around my ribs. Then I nodded. Thank you for telling me. Michael reached for his phone. Oh, and you'll appreciate this. Karma has already done its job. he showed me a message from one of our mutual friends. Apparently, Sheldon and Chloe had lasted only 2 weeks. The moment I was no longer part of Sheldon's chase, Chloe lost interest. She dumped him with complaints that he was needy and strangely intense, a complete reversal of the aloof confidence he had always projected with me. A hollow, humorless chuckle slipped out of me. Poetic, I said quietly, but I didn't feel vindicated, not even satisfied. The whole thing felt predictable, like watching the final scenes of a movie where the villain inevitably trips on the same trap he set for someone else. There was no triumph, only confirmation of what I already knew: they had been perfect for each other in the worst possible way. After that night, something inside me shifted for good. I began reclaiming parts of myself I had abandoned while waiting for Sheldon to choose the relationship I already believed we were in. I went to the gym after work instead of rushing home to be available for him. I joined coworkers for dinner instead of declining, because Sheldon might want to hang out later. I bought fresh fruit, cooked proper meals, read books in bed, and let silence fill the room in a way that felt comforting rather than lonely. It was startling how quickly my world expanded once his presence was erased from it. Then, 3 weeks after I left, he managed to slip through one final crack, an unfiltered email to my work address. Julia, please, I know you hate me, but I made a mistake. A huge one. You were right about her. She used me. I'm sorry. Please call me. I stared at the message for a few seconds. There it was, the apology he had stubbornly refused to give. Not out of remorse, but out of desperation. He was sorry for the consequences, not for the lies, the disrespect, or the cruelty disguised as logic and rules. I deleted the email, blocked the domain, and felt absolutely nothing. 3 days later, Michael sent a group text to several of us Jake's party on Saturday. Everyone better show up. A month ago, I would have invented an excuse to avoid the awkwardness of seeing Sheldon, the pitying looks from friends, the emotional spiral I knew I'd fall into. But now the idea didn't scare me. The thought of him no longer rattled my peace. When Saturday night came, I dressed simply: a black top, high-waisted jeans, a touch of gloss. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out steady and unshaken. I didn't go to the party to prove anything. I went because I wanted to, because I finally could. The party was already lively when I arrived. Warm lights spilling over crowded rooms filled with music, laughter, and familiar faces. I dropped the six-pack I'd brought into the cooler and waved as Michael spotted me from across the room. But before I could reach him, I felt a subtle shift in the air behind me, the unmistakable awareness of someone staring. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Sheldon had seen me walk in, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely ready for whatever came next. As soon as I sensed Sheldon behind me at Jake's party, my body reacted before my mind did. A faint tightening in my spine, a subtle rise in my chest. That instinctive awareness that appears when someone significant enters your orbit. I inhaled once, slow and steady, before turning around to face the man who had once told me we were not exclusive until he said so. The man who had watched me pack a suitcase and still believed I would eventually apologize for being hurt. He was standing near the edge of the doorway holding a red cup, but he wasn't drinking from it. He was watching me with an expression I recognized too well. A strange combination of regret and calculation, as though he was trying to decide which version of himself he should present. For a brief second, I saw the Sheldon I had once loved, the easy smile, the posture that looked relaxed even when he was anxious. But then he blinked, and the illusion dissolved. What remained was a man who had lost control of something he thought he owned. Julia, he said, his voice softer than I expected, almost tentative. I nodded in acknowledgement. Sheldon. He shifted his weight, clearly thrown off by my calmness. I wasn't cold or hostile. I simply wasn't available to him anymore. That unsettled him far more than anger would have. He took a few steps closer, then stopped, leaving just enough space between us to make it seem like the conversation was optional, as if I could walk away at any moment because I could. His eyes scanned me in a way that wasn't romantic or possessive, but searching, like he was trying to measure how much damage he had caused and whether he still had any influence left. You look good, he said finally, and the compliment felt both too little and too late. Thank you, I replied, keeping my tone polite but detached. He swallowed, glanced briefly at the floor, then back at me. Can we talk? Just us two? We're talking now, I said steadily. Sheldon's jaw tightened. For half a second, I tell he never managed to hide when things weren't going his way. But he forced a small smile, as if he could rewrite the mood by pretending we were still operating under the dynamics he was used to. Fine, I'll start. I owe you an apology. I raised an eyebrow internally. An apology from Sheldon was a rare phenomenon, rarely offered, and even more rarely sincere. He must have sensed my skepticism because he let out a breath that sounded like defeat. I messed up. I know that. The whole thing with Chloe. He rubbed the back of his neck. She wasn't who I thought she was. Neither were you, I replied simply. That caught him off guard. His eyes widened slightly, and the room's ambient chatter filled the silence that grew between us. He opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could, someone else appeared at his side. Chloe Bennett. The woman from his gym class. The woman he had been texting while lying in my bed. The woman who had played her part in exposing the cracks in our relationship, though she had clearly not intended to. She looked different from the version I had imagined. Her makeup was smudged at the corners, her hair slightly undone, and her expression carried that strained brightness of someone trying to hold themselves together with sheer force of will. The moment she saw me, an unmistakable flicker crossed her face, part guilt, part jealousy, part desperation. Julia, she said, forcing a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hi. Hi, I replied neutrally. Chloe shifted her gaze to Sheldon, then back to me, hands tightening around her cup. I didn't expect you to be here. That's funny, I said. I didn't expect to be warned about who else would be. Sheldon's face flushed with embarrassment, but Chloe rolled her eyes slightly as if the unfolding scene was somehow inconvenient to her rather than the consequence of her involvement. For what it's worth, I didn't know things were serious between you two, Chloe said. The way she said it felt rehearsed defensive, like a line she had repeated to justify her part in everything. We were together for a year, I answered calmly. I would consider that serious. Sheldon told me you weren't exclusive, she said, her tone sharpening, so I didn't think. It doesn't matter what you thought, I interrupted. What matters is what he believed, and that tells me everything I need to know. Sheldon reacted instantly, his shoulders tensing. Julia, come on. No, I said quietly but firmly. You told me we were not exclusive because we hadn't had the conversation. Meanwhile, you were treating me like a partner, letting me meet your parents, spending holidays with me, talking about moving in together, until the moment I asked for the respect that any real relationship deserves. Chloe's expression faltered. Sheldon's head lowered a fraction. For a moment, the three of us stood in a triangle of truths none of them wanted to confront. The noise of the party swelled around us, laughter music, clinking bottles, while this tiny pocket of stillness revealed more honesty than a year of conversations with Sheldon ever had. Chloe broke first. He used me, she said suddenly, her voice cracking. The second you left, he changed. He acted like he owned me. He kept texting constantly, wanting attention, getting irritated if I didn't respond fast enough. I thought he just liked the chase. Her tone shifted into something bitter. Turns out that's exactly what he liked. Sheldon flinched, mortified. Chloe, stop. You can't blame me for not wanting to be with someone like that, she snapped. I said, my tone steady. But don't mistake this for a shared tragedy. You and I are not on the same side. We were both deceived, yes, but not in the same way. I looked directly at Sheldon. You didn't just cheat or flirt. You built two separate realities and fed each of us a version of you that suited your ego. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. And the most revealing part, when everything collapsed, neither of you apologized to the person you hurt most. You apologized when the consequences affected you. The words hit harder than I expected. Sheldon's face stiffened. Chloe looked away. The room's noise faded into a dull hum, while the truth settled like dust over all three of us. I'm not angry anymore, I said, my voice softening, not from affection, but from closure. I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here because I was invited to a party and because I wanted to live my life without avoiding places out of fear of running into you. Sheldon stared at me, eyes flickering, with a mix of pain and disbelief. So, what now? We just pretend none of this happened. No, I said quietly. We don't pretend anything. We acknowledge what happened, we accept what's broken, and then we move forward separately. Chloe looked stunned. Sheldon looked hollow. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a clean, weightless peace. I stepped back slightly, ready to walk away. But before I did, I met Sheldon's eyes one last time. You kept saying we weren't exclusive until you decided it, I said. But you forgot something important. I let my voice drop to a quiet, decisive calm. I get to decide when I'm done. Without waiting for a response, I walked away from both of them. Not angrily, not dramatically, just with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what and who she no longer needed. When I walked away from Sheldon and Chloe at Jake's party, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was something far more powerful, a quiet, unwavering sense of finality, the kind that settles over you like dust on sunlight, the kind that tells you the worst is over and the future is no longer tied to the past you've survived. I found Michael near the kitchen with two friends, and although their conversations halted briefly when I approached, clearly they'd seen at least part of the confrontation. No one asked me about it. They just made space for me and eased me into the circle the way you reposition furniture around something fragile. It was subtle, warm, and exactly what I needed. By the time I left the party that night, I realized my heart didn't ache. It didn't twist or pull toward Sheldon the way it once did. Instead, everything felt calm, clean, free. Over the next few days, little fragments of the aftermath reached me indirectly through Michael, or through mutual friends who were more observant than they appeared. Apparently, after I walked off, Sheldon had tried to pull Chloe aside to contain whatever damage he believed she'd done to his reputation. They ended up arguing in the backyard so loudly that half the guests heard every word. Chloe accused him of manipulating her. Sheldon accused her of ruining his chance to fix things with me. Then, predictably, they both turned on each other, each one scrambling to avoid accountability. Someone said Chloe left in tears. Someone else said Sheldon stayed for another hour, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire understanding of himself dissolve in public. For the first time, I wasn't in the center of the drama. I wasn't the one people whispered about. I wasn't the broken-hearted girlfriend or the betrayed woman. Their implosion existed separately from me, like a distant storm cloud drifting across another city's skyline. Life moved forward quickly after that. The sterile hotel room, which had felt like a hiding place, suddenly felt like a waiting room between chapters. 2 weeks later, I signed the lease on a new apartment, a bright, airy one-bedroom on the third floor of a renovated building filled with young professionals who minded their own business. When I moved in, sunlight poured through the tall windows in a way that made the hardwood floor glow. It wasn't big, but it was mine, fully mine. No shared memories, no traces of someone else's presence, no lavender shampoo mixed with the scent of betrayal. Just clean air and white walls, waiting for a new beginning. I spent the first weekend assembling furniture, hanging up artwork, arranging plants, and cooking in the kitchen, as if I needed to imprint my identity onto every square inch. It felt good to create something from scratch, to make a space that reflected who I was when no one was draining my energy with shifting boundaries and fabricated rules. I slept deeply in that apartment, peacefully, safely. At work, things started changing too. I threw myself into projects I had postponed during the months I had built my schedule around Sheldon's unpredictable availability. I volunteered to lead a cross-department initiative. I attended networking events I used to skip. My supervisor noticed. She complimented my focus. She invited me to a meeting I had never been included in before. And within a month, she offered me a promotion to project coordinator, a role that had been open for months but never considered for internal candidates, until she saw the new drive I brought. It felt like a blessing, but also like proof of how much of myself I had once sacrificed to keep someone else comfortable. Meanwhile, Sheldon and Chloe's reputations quietly unraveled. Mutual friends began telling Michael things that inevitably made their way to me, how Sheldon had become withdrawn at group gatherings, how he drank more than usual, how he'd mentioned me far too often for someone supposedly fine. Chloe, on the other hand, became the centerpiece of every whispered story. Not admired, not respected, but pitied. She apparently cried at girls' nights, complained about being used, and told various versions of the truth, none of which aligned. Some nights she blamed Sheldon entirely. Other nights she blamed me, insisting I had manipulated the narrative. But the common thread in every retelling was simple: neither of them had moved on. And for the first time, that reality didn't please me. It didn't empower me. I didn't want them to suffer. I didn't want victory in their misery. I only wanted distance, and I finally had it. Somewhere in the simplicity of this new rhythm, morning coffee on my balcony evening, runs around the neighborhood park. Quiet nights reading until I fell asleep, I started becoming someone I liked, someone I recognized, someone who wasn't living in reaction to a man's emotional negligence. A few months later, I met someone new entirely by accident. His name was Julian Reyes, and the first time we spoke was in the local bookstore where I frequently went to unwind. He was standing in the same aisle as I was flipping through a paperback he clearly had no intention of putting back on the shelf. We exchanged a few casual comments about the author, then somehow kept talking each line, building upon the last until we reached the register. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I said yes. Julian was the kind of man who listened when I spoke, who didn't scan the room for alternatives, who didn't need to be the center of attention to feel secure. He didn't rescue me or fix anything, he simply showed up consistently and gently, with no hidden dynamics or manipulative subtleties. Being around him felt soft and unforced, like exhaling. I didn't fall for him quickly. I wasn't ready for that yet, but I enjoyed the way he made the world feel calm instead of chaotic. It was enough. The true moment of clarity, the one that defined everything, happened months later during a quiet evening at a bar with Michael. He took a sip of his drink, then gave me a look that said he was debating whether to share something. "So, Sheldon still talks about you," he finally said almost reluctantly. "A lot, actually." I didn't react. Okay. Michael scratched the side of his cheek, choosing his words. "He regrets everything. He tells people you were the best thing that ever happened to him. Chloe apparently brings you up at every party, too. She cries about losing him. And people are, well, honestly tired of it." I absorbed that without blinking. "I see." Michael stared at me, waiting for more anger, satisfaction, bitterness, anything. But nothing came. Not a flicker of pride, not a spark of resentment, not even indifference framed as performative calm, just a gentle, steady sense of separation. They were speaking about a life I no longer belonged to, people I no longer recognized. "Julia, that's it?" Michael asked, almost laughing. "Just, I see." "Yes," I said with a small smile, "because it's not my story anymore." And that was the real revelation. Their regrets weren't compliments. Their tears weren't justice. Their downfall wasn't karma delivered in some dramatic, cinematic fashion. It was simply the consequence of who they were and who they chose to be. Meanwhile, my life had expanded into something richer, lighter, and infinitely more honest. The greatest revenge wasn't happiness, success, or a new relationship. It wasn't public humiliation or private misery. It was silence. The silence in my mind the moment I stopped giving them space. The silence in my heart when I realized I no longer needed closure. And the silence in my soul when I understood that I had outgrown the version of myself who would have stayed. Sheldon once said, "We're not exclusive until I say so." But the final truth, the one that echoed through every peaceful moment of